Sean, can you hear me? Can you turn on your camera and count to 10 for me? I can't hear you. I Can you hear me, Sean? Can you hear me, Sean? Can you hear me? We still can't hear you. Count to 10 when you're ready. I still can't hear you. Sure, if you want to try it up. Maybe because he's on his phone, I don't know. Ready for her, Larry? Can you count to 10 for me?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Wonderful.
We are resumed. Here we are. All right. We're moving to the third agency goal, uh, uh, which you submitted is stabilize neighborhoods overall. So for this one, what does success look like? How do we know if we succeeded in stabilizing neighborhoods overall?
So what I wanted to say is I would edit this to say promote neighborhood stabilization. One of the major things we do, as you know, is fund investment in housing in various communities across all 8 wards. And that is a stabilizing force in and of itself. But as you know, you and I went to a community meeting that talked about, well, we don't have groceries, we don't have hairdressers, we don't have cleaners, we have to drive all the way here and there to get what we need around these homes. There's nothing for us to walk to do. So that's part of stabilization, right? That's part of promoting community development, is making sure the housing is connecting with other needs that are within the neighborhood and in the community. So success to me looks like, using our neighborhood-based activities in order to promote neighborhood stabilizations through our community-based organizations. So some of the things that I would look at is the number of tenants or eviction prevention workshops around anti-displacement strategies, because as we invest, right, there's this notion that there's gentrification and we're moving people out, right? So we want people to stay that are there and can afford to be there and that they don't have to move out. So anti-displacement strategies include, workshops on eviction prevention, foreclosure prevention, those kind of things. Also placemaking activities, which are targeted supports to DHCD investments, including small business technical assistance around existing businesses being counseled and advised, attracting new businesses to the area that we're targeting, marketing events to generate economic activity, coordination where we can with DEMPED, DISB, and DSLBD to attract small business development funding support, leverage external funding sources for potential small business funding activities. And also you're familiar probably with the facade improvement program, making the businesses that are there attractive so that they're improving their facade. So maybe number of facades completed in the targeted areas, and number of facades that are completed within a certain time frame, maybe 9 months from notice to proceed. Those are some of the things that we would be looking at in terms of success in numbers.
So are those how would we measure progress toward this goal?
Progress for are the number of counseling sessions, how many we have, or how many evictions we prevented, how many foreclosures we've prevented, how many counseling sessions were had, and how many of those translated into actual prevention.
And what's your goal for the number of evictions or foreclosures prevented?
So the goals would be 50 overall, and anti-displacement goals, 50 overall. Whether it be tenant eviction or foreclosure preventions.
Okay. And will the evictions or foreclosures prevented?
So once they come into counseling, we'll track them, right? So it starts with a counseling session, and then we'll know what the outcome was.
What funding is used for eviction and foreclosure
For
prevention?
all of the neighborhood-based activities, it's all community development block grant dollars.
And how much roughly do we have through CDBG?
I think it's 14 million, but
So the entitlement grant is a little over 15. And then we budget a certain amount in program income, which are loan repayments. The budget next year includes an assumption of $8 million in program income. If the economy stays the way it is, we may have difficulty hitting that target.
Okay.
But the budget next year for CDBG is 23 million in total.
Okay, so 23 million divided by 50 evictions, that's a lot of money per eviction prevented. Which would lead me to say that this goal is probably modest. So how do we flesh this out more? So if the goal is stabilize neighborhoods overall and the specific measurement is prevent 50 evictions and foreclosures, that's a pretty modest goal. That doesn't, or a measurement. One, it's modest. Two, I don't know that this equals stabilizing neighborhoods overall. So how do we? So that's one measure of progress. How else would we measure progress for stabilizing neighborhoods, or no, promoting neighborhood stabilization?
So another one would be what we do through our small business technical assistance program. And those are, again, counseling existing businesses that are in the area to stay in the area, to attract new businesses to the area, and do marketing events around the targeted area.
Okay, so in the target, how do we define the target area?
So the target area in this upcoming RFP will be defined. So let me just back up. So there's also a NERSA that we applied for wards 7 and 8. There is one will be along the Minnesota Avenue corridor and one will be along the Barry Avenue corridor. These are two areas where we've asked HUD to release the public service cap, and that's in process of being reviewed and hopefully approved. And there we can provide more housing counseling services than would normally be allowed under the public service cap. So a percentage of what we can do with our community development block grant is divided between activities and personnel services. So we want to make sure that we can do as many as we can. So those will be two of the target areas with help from NERSA. So we can focus more money into those particular areas. Other ways that we're identifying areas is to figure out where the most investments we have made in each of the wards. So these are to support the community and neighborhoods in the wards where we've made most of the investments. So we're looking at in our RFP or RFA, we'll define the areas where we've had most investments and asking our community-based organizations to come up with plans that do anti-displacement and help with small business technical assistance and planning around the areas where we've made the most investment in the last 2 to 5 years.
Okay, I'll come back to the Minnesota Avenue and Anacostia parts, but stand with adding some specificity and measurability on this for the small business technical assistance program and counseling the small businesses and attracting new businesses. What's the specific goal on those?
So it will be the number of counseling sessions that we will have had through our CBOs with small businesses in the area. And that will be divided between existing and new businesses.
And how many counseling sessions are you aiming for?
We are aiming for at least 100 counseling sessions for new and 100 counseling sessions for existing businesses.
Okay, so 100 counseling sessions and 50 evictions or in foreclosures prevented. What else should we be looking at for measurability here?
One of the other things that we could look at is how many jobs were created as a result of new businesses opening or through that year with the businesses that have established themselves in those communities.
Okay, So how many jobs are you aiming to create?
I would say a good number would be about 250 jobs
In the targeted areas?
in the various targeted areas.
So evictions and foreclosures prevented, counseling sessions for existing and new businesses, and jobs created. Is there anything else we should be looking at for measurability on this goal?
One that we can't control, but we hope that would be an outcome for the counseling sessions is that these businesses get funded through micro funded or micro loans or small business loans, whatever they need. So I would want to see that there's, at least from the counseling session, that maybe like 25% of the, maybe that's a little high, but 25% of the counseling sessions actually result in 25% of them getting some kind of financing or loans to open their businesses or maintain their businesses.
And how much control does DHCD have over that?
So we have control over the metrics that we set with our CBOs, and through the RFA, we're asking them to set their goals and their placemaking. So we negotiate that in our grant agreement. So the goal would be, to have them apply for loans as needed, or to grow, or to stabilize, or to expand, or so that would be part of the targets that we pass on to the CBOs.
Okay. You pass them on to the CBOs, but the CBOs ultimately make the selections.
Right.
Okay.
They're doing the marketing, they're doing the attraction. We're just monitoring that they are doing what they've agreed to do.
Okay. And are there any potential obstacles that might hinder progress toward this goal?
I mean, I think that we have less funding that'll be available to the CBOs, but in that, we're asking them to be really strategic about figuring out what their best skills are. I think that CBOs applied for, a lot of different things, and some of them are good at some things and not everything on the list, and some of them are better at other things. So some of what the CBOs do is some of the intake for single family residential rehab programs. They do HPTF, housing counseling services. So if there's an organization that's really strong with housing counseling services, maybe they should collaborate with another agency that is stronger at small business technical assistance in order to address the targeted areas and make sure that we are being as impactful with the skill set that they have.
Okay. Have you achieved similar goals to these in the past?
Yes.
Okay.
So for example, we did in 2023, there were 6,000 approximately small business technical engagements that resulted in approximately 5.9 million in micro enterprise loans that these businesses got.
Okay. So this
And
goal
5,000 jobs were created over time.
over roughly what period of time?
I would say in the last 4 years.
Okay. This goal relates to investments in neighborhoods that support the ecosystem. Well, let me go back for a second. So if we created 5,000 jobs in the past roughly 4 years, then isn't the 250 jobs created next year, isn't that goal a little low?
Well, we have a lot less money to, and I think that we'll exceed it. But again, this is over time and the needs are different. We're doing a little something different with the RFA. And they're saying that there's 5,000 jobs created. We want to make sure this is really pointed in specific areas. So not the whole
Perfect
district.
Yeah. Okay, I like it. So this goal is really supporting the ecosystem around affordable housing. It includes housing counseling, business technical assistance. I want to walk through the housing counseling services budget. DHCD works in partnership with community-based organizations or CBOs to provide advice and support to residents trying to find housing. And that's what's supported with the housing counseling budget. Is that right? So DHCD doesn't do it yourself. You do it through CBOs.
Yes,
Okay.
CBOs are paid to do housing counseling sessions.
So I believe DHCD partners with 12 community-based organizations and also has a housing resource center in its Ward 8 office that's run by DHCD staff. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Who's the typical client for the Housing Resource Center?
So currently, the Housing Resource Center is mostly used by Rental Accommodations Division concerns. There is when they're coming to file their rent grievances and do the paperwork to register their rents is primarily doing that. But now that we've moved over to the new facility, which I hope you come to the ribbon cutting on Thursday. Hope you'll be there.
I'll be traveling on for a wedding.
Okay, well, that's a good reason not to be there. What we plan to do is really make it a one-stop shop now that we've moved to the new location, so that anyone that comes into the Housing Resource Center, as we've experienced, people come to DHCD thinking they can get every answer for every housing question answered. And that's challenging, right? You come down to our offices and you're like, oh, we're not the housing authority. Oh, we're not DHS. So what we like to do is be able to work with our sister agencies by making sure that we are doing a little bit of soft handoff so that people haven't wasted their time. We're one district government. We may not know everything, but we'll link into making them an appointment for somewhere else or making sure they get the information. And in that, as part of this new RFA, we'll be asking for our CBOs to rotate through the Housing Resource Center and provide, information that they can provide. So if someone comes down there, they can start their housing counseling application. They may be able to start their HPTF application. So it is not a disappointing visit once they've, sometimes we see senior citizens that need information on single family residential rehab application. They need help. So let's start them with the application. And by rotating our CBOs through that, we'll be able to do just that, I think.
These community-based organizations, they currently receive CDBG funding. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Do you know how many residents each of the 12 CBOs serve last fiscal year? Do you track the number that they
I
serve?
don't, but I do track overall how many how many how many DC households became first-time home buyers out of the counseling sessions. I track how many foreclosures were prevented through housing count for foreclosure prevention services, but not by the CBO. I have them collectively. We do have what they report. So I can get it individually by each CBO, but today I just have the summary.
Sure. But you have the information somewhere to know which
Like how-
organizations receive the most traffic.
Yes,
Okay.
it's self-reported,
Okay.
but yes.
Okay. I mean, which could be indicative of, their programs and communication, also could be indicative of where they're located.
Right. Or how they market, or,
Yep.
maybe their skill set is stronger on one side or another. So, or what they applied for. So yes.
So how do you know how to equitably distribute funding across the organizations?
They do a services plan
Okay.
about what they can do. And so we take their plan and allocate the funding accordingly to that. So, and then they submit what they've done according to each of the categories, and that they're paid off of that.
Okay. The mayor's proposed budget recommends cutting a third of the funding for housing counseling services, or about $4.8 million, which will necessarily, I think, lead to a reduction in services. We've heard from CBOs and residents concerned about the impact of these cuts on services. What conversations have you had with the organizations around the impact of the proposed cuts on their work and services?
There's concern about the proposed cuts. Obviously, I think there's a long-standing history of community-based organizations providing this work. Many of them are the same community-based organizations that are providing this work. I think that it's provided across all 8 wards. I think this is an opportunity to be really succinct about where we need them to focus around our existing housing investments, so that, you know, sometimes, as we've seen before, the housing gets put up, people are excited, but then there are challenges in the neighborhood around it. They can't get services. So I think that this will make a lot of sense in terms of being very pointed about what we're trying to achieve and accomplish.
So do you feel like they'll be able to offer somewhere near the same level of services that they next fiscal year that they are this fiscal year?
I think some of them are better at services than others, honestly. I think that this is a chance to like really reflect on focusing on what they're really, really good at. I don't know that they'll be able, I can't answer that for them, but I do know many of them are nonprofit organizations. The reliance on DC funding from the district government is probably significant. This is an opportunity to figure out other resources, other things that they can do to help support their organizations. It's not easy for anyone at this point, but this is sort of the shared sacrifice that has to be made. But can they support the same amount? Probably it'll be difficult. But we're also not probably going to do the same amount of other things because we don't have the budget, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like, you know, if we had the same amount of dollars, do you need the same amount of housing counseling service? You need to take the same amount of applications for single family rehab. We're probably not there either.
So, does this conflict with your goals around stabilizing neighborhoods? If these organizations are going to get less funding, likely be able to serve fewer people, how will you be able to achieve the goals that you're setting?
I think we're being really strategic about it this year. Like there hasn't been an RFA for a long time, and this will be the first one in a very long time. And being focused around where the investments have been made will be more impactful than I think it has been before. It's been sort of just offered widely for anyone. It still would be offered for anyone, but I think being around neighborhoods that we've already invested in with a lot of, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars makes sense to strategically put those CBOs to focus on those areas.
Okay. We'll dig into this over time. Like you said, some of these CBOs rely pretty heavily on the district for funding. They will likely have to reduce staff, you know, so I'm worried about the domino impacts of that on the people that they serve. So let me go back to the Benning Road and Anacostia funding. So DHCD applied for 2 neighborhood revitalization strategy area opportunities related to community development, one for Benning Road and one for Anacostia. The application wouldn't, as far as I understand, result in more funding, but it would give DHCD more flexibility to use federal money to provide community services to neighborhoods. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, what roughly is that increased
So,
flexibility?
for example, you would be able to fund more of the things that we're talking about in very specific areas. There's a public service cap on CDBG, and I think my financial officer could explain that a little better, but this will allow that service cap to be lifted. So if you were only allowed to, an example of like do 50 housing counseling services in a particular zip code, now we could do 150 there. And it wouldn't have an impact on our CDBG regulations or our compliance around a CDBG.
So there's, what's the cap? I mean, why is there a cap now?
Okay.
Looking up the exits.
Cap, no, wait.
And before you answer, I'm going to swear you in. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you are about to provide to the Committee on Housing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thanks so much. We'll see if your microphone works. We'll keep our fingers crossed.
So currently, HUD has a.
Move the mic a
Oh,
little
sorry.
closer. And introduce yourself, please.
My
for the
name is
record.
Kellyanne Morrow, and I am the DHCD's Grant Management Officer. And my responsibility is to oversee the federal grants that come from HUD. So in reference to Community Development Block Grant, there is a 15% public service cap that jurisdictions must abide by. That 15% equates to about $3 million. We are wanting to target housing counseling into a small area of Ward 7 and 8 to provide more opportunities for the households living in that area to receive housing counseling funding or housing counseling activities or services. We will not be adding money. We will simply, that cap does not apply to the areas of Ward 7 and 8. Currently, the plan has been reviewed by HUD and is in the final stages of approval.
So, excuse me, to make sure I have so there's a 15% or $3 million cap on the amount of CDBG funds that can be used for this purpose.
For housing counseling that is not tied directly to home ownership. So when we're doing budget counseling, we're doing foreclosure counseling. There's a lot of activities. There are 17 services that our CBOs provide through housing counseling. And when we have such a small amount of money that can be adjusted to the public service cap or signed off by the public service cap, we're always looking for ways that we can stretch our dollars to do more. And one of the ways to do that is through a NRSA.
Okay. Have we applied for this flexibility in the past, or at least in the recent past?
We have not applied for it within the last 5 years, but
Okay.
yes, the district did have the NRSA. I believe it was about 8 to 10 years ago.
Okay. Okay.
I can get you the exact date. But it has not been within the last 5.5 years that I've worked for the district.
Okay. No need to follow up with that. I don't think.
Okay.
I appreciate the clarity. And so these community services that DHCD provides, these are through CBOs as well, is that right? Okay. And how would the reduction to the housing counseling services budget impact this work overall?
I mean, I think the reduction just impacts the amount of people that can be served potentially. hopefully not. Hopefully the CBOs and through our working with them, we can figure out how to do what we need to do. There's no way in telling right now. But if I were to say 1-to-1, if this is what you're using to get it done, there's less money, then you probably have less dollars to achieve what you want to achieve. So I don't think there would be a significant impact in outcomes for instance, single family residential rehab program or HPAP or things like that. But for people that are sort of wanting to plan ahead, there may be some challenge there, but I'm just guessing.
Okay. Let me move to a different topic around engaging with program participants.
Thank you, Penny.
At the performance oversight, we talked about improving communication within DHCD programs. Customer service is an area most of the agencies under this committee need to improve. The mayor's proposed budget reduces DHCD's communications budget by $67,000 to a total of $333,000. What is DHCD's communications budget used for currently?
It's currently used for outreach activities. It's used for planning our CAPER hearings. It's used for anything that has to do with marketing activities around DHCD. Those are the kind of the main things that it's used for.
Okay. Is any of that funding used to communicate with program participants in specific programs like HPAP or HAF?
Sometimes, yes.
In what ways?
Advertising, mailings, information, working with marketing agency, like just doing banners, doing events, things like that.
Well, so, understanding that, I think many.
And one of the major things that we do, right, is our National Homeownership Month. That's a lot of that budget goes to that. Just all the things that we do related to notifying people about what we have to offer and putting information out, having stakeholder meetings, all those kind of things.
So looking at the potential for a smaller communications budget, I don't know, and I'm not going to ask you offhand whether there's a correlation between the work you do around National Homeowners Month and like if that has any impact on the number of homeowners or opportunities for homeowners. But as we have to make more difficult strategic choices, I encourage you to look at whether there is any visible results from some of the communications, because I am worried about communications with program participants, again, like HPAP and HAF, where we need to make sure we are continuing to communicate well with folks that are, using or trying to use existing programs. I want to return to two specific programs we covered during the performance hearing: the Homeowners Assistance Fund, or HAF, and the Home Purchase Assistance Program, or HPAP. On HAF, DHCD keeps a dashboard showing how much money is left. The HAF dashboard hasn't been updated since April 12th and shows that $35 million out of the $50 million has been spent. Someone reading that chart would think $15 million is still left in the pot, but the number is actually much less. I know you told me that we're dwindling down. How much HAF money is currently available for residents trying to prevent foreclosure?
I'm going to.
Good afternoon. I'm going to swear you in too. If you would raise your right hand, do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you are about to provide to the Committee on Housing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Do you need me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Okay, when you answer, please give us your name and title. Half dashboard. So I'm looking at the dashboard, it looks like $15 million is left. I believe it's less than that. How much is available for currently for residents trying to prevent home foreclosures?
Hello, I'm Sheeta Stewart. I am the manager for the HAP program. And we have about 6 million
Okay.
left for the program. We have 43.1 million allocated for program funding.
6 million with 1.1 million of that already allocated, or?
43.1 million allocated
at
for the
40.
program.
I
Yes.
see, I see, okay. Why is the funding amount so much less than what's shown on the dashboard?
Because the remaining amount is our admin budget.
So so that is not available, the admin budget is not available for people trying to prevent foreclosure?
No,
Okay, so how much of the remaining money is available for people trying to prevent foreclosure?
about 6 million.
Okay, I see. The gap between the 15 and the 6 is
Yes.
the admin. I'm with you. Okay. Is the admin a percentage of the amount allocated?
Yes, they cannot cap 15%.
Okay. Is there a reason not to deduct that from, as you allocate money, deduct the admin cost so that people don't believe there's more money available than there actually is?
We can move admin funds to program, but it does cover our administrator that administers the program. That's how we pay them, and also our salaries. And there's other line items in the admin budget, but we can go back and revisit it every quarter to see what we can do with the funding between admin and the program.
Okay, I mean, I certainly welcome your counsel and expertise on that. But if I want folks to get paid for their work.
Yes.
But if I'm a homeowner and facing foreclosure and I feel like there's 15 million left, I might feel a little better than I should right now. So again, I want to leave that to your expertise, but I wanted to flag that because, well, first of all, I wanted to clear up my confusion.
So I'll just say that we're at the point where we have to make those decisions and make sure that we have what we're need for admin in the budget through 2026, because there are some administrative things. The program goes to 2026,
Yeah.
correct? So whatever is out there left that needs to be paid, and then we're going to scrub the budget and work with our CFO to make sure that we are being fastidious in terms of admin.
I appreciate it. Let me pause and turn to my colleague, Councilmember Fruman.
Thank you very much, Chairman White. Really going back and forth between hearings this afternoon, so thanks for your patience. And forgive me if I ask questions that were asked while I was at a different hearing. One of the things in the testimony maybe you heard was Patrick McEnany from Somerset suggested an idea of a new kind of way to subsidize creation of affordable housing using, instead of LRSP vouchers, using a different kind of shallow subsidy to pay for the difference between 50% AMI and 30% AMI. And I'm curious whether you've looked at that idea, if you have reactions to that idea, what kinds of things might be necessary for us to do to enable you to pursue an idea like that. Curious your reaction.
Well, I'm going to let Valerie Piper, our housing advisor, answer that, but it would require a legislative change.
Okay.
Yes, it would. And it does seem to be a more cost-effective way of getting to the 30% MFI rents within a project that's being financed. The way that we do it, the sort of full-on capital recapitalization. Excuse me. So I think it could be, very interesting, but in our current program array and set of legislation around LRSP, we don't have that tool.
So we would have to, is it that we would have to do legislation to empower you to create a new tool and empower you to use it, and that
believe so,
perhaps
yes.
fund it also? Yeah,
Mm.
okay. But you're intrigued by the idea.
Intrigued.
Okay. A different idea that's been out there is a different vehicle to
Mhm.
create affordable housing is social housing. And I don't know whether we've had any conversation about that yet today. There's been a lot of testimony about the Montgomery County mechanism for creating affordable housing through social housing. Have you looked at that Montgomery County model? Do you have thoughts about whether or not that's transportable here and might be a promising vehicle to leverage dollars more effectively in order to create more affordable units?
So I think we're kind of already doing it. If you look at our housing preservation fund, we've used 10 million every year for the last 4 years and leveraged it to $180 million. So and it's a revolving fund. So we're doing it in our housing preservation fund already to preserve units. So I don't think that the social housing sort of is this, and I've said this before, is this term that means a lot of different things. What Montgomery County is doing is a financing tool that is a revolver that allows them to continue to invest in affordable housing after it's been paid back over a time. The difference that we have here is I think they do it through a bond financing. That's something that we could do as well. We also do have bonds and bonding authority through DEMPED, through the Internal Revenue, what is it called? The 501c3 bonds. So that's also another opportunity so we have the tools. We're also already doing revolvers. There's nothing, to coin it, social housing it's a financing tool. But yes, we could do it. We are doing something like that already with our housing preservation fund.
But not in a housing production setting, but in a housing preservation. So the tools are there. Would you need legislative authorization in order to do it on the production side? Well, and one piece of it is, there are a lot of things. You're right. Social housing is a phrase and people pour into it lots of different meanings. One meaning that people pour into it is that ultimately the municipality, the county owns the building. Do you need, am I hearing you say you don't really need legislative authority to do this, or would you need legislative authority to start using the revolver vehicle, using the bonds that are out there on the production side?
I don't think that we would need legislative authority. We would need legislative authority if it was a new bond, but I think we're potentially have the vehicles right now. If you were to use, like we have bonding authority currently in the district. If this was a new bond, potentially you would need to do that, but I don't, that's a whole nother sort of calculation whether or not the district wants to bond additionally for this purpose. We are already doing revolvers. In terms of owning the property, I mentioned in my testimony on social housing before, the district has been down that road with like AWC, NCRC, and many other types of, and it fell apart. It's just not something that, if we look at history, has worked well in the district previously. I mean, there's probably maybe a way to do it new and different, but I think owning the property, adding a whole agency to do that would not be an efficient way to do things. And I don't think that we would garner any more than we would do by buying land and creating permanent affordability.
Okay. Last question. We talked a little before about the 4% bonds, and that, now we've used up our 4% bonds, and then we'll get another allocation of 4% bonds in the next year. and those may or may not be spoken to. What's the end point where you think the projects that are in the pipeline that have been approved that want to be married with 4% bonds will work through that backlog and be able to take on new projects that rely on 4% bonds?
I think that if we were to allocate every project that currently has HPTF subsidy or ARPA subsidy, we would probably, and through all the bonds, if the 25% tests were employed, we would be able to get through everything in this year in early 2025. If it's not, we're looking at probably early 2026 for everything that currently has a commitment of subsidy,
Okay.
new and preservation.
Gotcha. And that was a very specific answer to my question. Thank you very
You're
much. And thank you for your testimony. Talk to you later.
Thank you, Councilmember Fruman. So let me wrap up half of funding very quickly, particularly given the issue of ambiguity and frustrations with HPAP last year. I want to make sure we're as clear with residents as possible. As I was engaging in the discussion, it seems like the amount left, the dashboard reflects more internal clarity than external clarity, because I don't think it matters to the public how much is used for administrative fees. What they want to know is how much is left that they can apply for. And so I think people may act with a different sense of urgency, seeing 5 million as opposed to 15 million, or 1 million as opposed to 6 million. So I would ask that you consider making some changes to the dashboard so that the information is clear to the user as possible, what is left for them to use. Last fall, DHCD created a dashboard for a different program, obviously HPAP, and a plan to make sure it wasn't overcommitting funds it no longer had. We haven't seen that same level of planning for half. What is DHCD doing to make sure there's enough funding left to cover existing half requests?
So we are actually doing an audit of half currently to make sure that we have enough money to continue on. We are figuring out when the end date for half will be internally, and going to plan to communicate that once we understand what the exact number is and how much admin we can move to serving more residents. So we should be able to do that, in the next coming weeks, and hopefully before June, July timeframe, and we have enough to keep going for now with the current request. But we will be notifying people of the projection.
Okay, I don't know how many applications come in per day, per week, per month, but I want to make sure we don't see a situation where there's a slew of applications and then people find out that the money is exhausted.
No, we will be sharing the close date. But one of the things that I will say about half is it's very interesting to me how the program is legally administered, right? There's a number of people that have gone through the HAP program multiple times. So that's also, there's a number of people that have HAF and other subsidies combined. But that does not take anything away from, there's just duplicate applications a lot of times is what I wanted to share. That does not take away the fact that we aren't going to communicate properly when the program's ending.
How would somebody use HAF multiple times?
They're allowed to.
Okay. Okay. What data do we have on HAF to indicate the success of the program or lack thereof?
Well, I think it's amount of people served, what they've, the payments that they get, if they are, if they requested a second, third time, I don't know that that's success or not success. I'm not sure how to interpret that actually. I can guess, but it's the amount of people that we're able to serve and to prevent, foreclosures or, to catch them up.
Okay. Yeah, let me flag, my guess is that we will be half hour-ish left.
Mhm.
I know folks have kids, families, situations, so I like to try to, once I realize about how much time is
For
left.
you, I'll leave my kid on the corner. No problems.
I think he'd be okay, so he find his way here, looking for you. How will, when half money is gone, how will the city support homeowners facing foreclosure?
That's a very good question. I think most of it will rely on the CBO counseling, foreclosure prevention counseling, and eviction prevention counseling. There's not a funding source that's identified to replace half currently.
The counseling, what does that usually entail? What are people learning in the counseling sessions that might help them avoid foreclosure?
Hold on one second. Gonna have Bill Winston explain it.
Thank you. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you are about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you so much.
I'm neighborhood-based activities manager.
Thank you. And can you give me your name again?
William Winston.
William Winston, thank you. And Mr. Winston, what are residents who are facing foreclosure? What are they learning? What tools are they gaining in the counseling that might help them avoid foreclosure?
It would get a range of counseling services from a HUD certified counselor. It would involve understanding forbearance and the possibility of loan mitigations. It would also include their credit counseling and ways to improve their situation.
Sure. How do you evaluate this is done by CBOs, correct?
Done by CBOs who have HUD certified counselors.
Okay.
And it would also include familiar with the foreclosure process and the court process.
Okay. And how do you evaluate the effectiveness of the CBOs that get that funding?
Right now, it's basically self-reported by the CBOs as to the foreclosures that have been prevented.
Okay.
But in FY23, we had a number of foreclosures that were prevented. It was approaching 1,500, I believe.
Okay. And they self-report the number of foreclosures not prevented, not necessarily the number of people they spoke to. I mean, they don't conflate those two numbers is what I'm asking.
No, that's
Okay.
correct. That's they're asked very specifically about the number of people that they're in contact with,
Mhm.
the number of counseling sessions, the number of unduplicated households, and then specifically about the number of foreclosures prevented.
Okay. Is protecting residents from foreclosure, do we consider that housing preservation?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, I'll move to HPAP now. Thank you, Mr. Winston. On HPAP, the total HPAP funding ran out in June of 2023, about 9 months into the fiscal year. Then for this fiscal year, there was $26.2 million in the budget for HPAP. Is that about right? Okay.
I believe that's right.
That funding ran out January 11th, which is roughly ran out in about 3 months. Yeah, about 3 months. So DC government uses a program called DIFS to track the district's budget. And DIFS shows the amount of money spent and the amount still available for our programs. So I want to walk through what it showed for HPAP as of last Thursday for fiscal year 24. DIFS showed $26.3 million in an initial budget, which roughly matches the 26.2 million listed on DHCD's public dashboard. You know, just sort of a rounding. It showed an extra $7.3 million in an adjustment budget, which means 33.6 million in a total budget. Was that $7.3 million available to the general HPAP applicant pool? So I think there was 7.3 million added to the 26.2 that was funded.
Almost all of it is, yes, there's 3.8 million of it that is set aside for a special housing development that is dependent upon HPAP within the ARPA funding that was added.
Okay. What was that project?
Crawford Landing,
I'm sorry.
Crawford Landing.
Why was that carved out?
It was a home ownership project.
Okay.
So the assumption was that in order to get lower income folks into the project, that they would need to have HPAP available to them.
Has that project delivered at this point?
Yes, I think there's roughly 10 homes left
Okay.
remaining.
And so with the 7.3 or even the 7.3 minus the 3.8 for Crawford Landing, why wasn't this adjustment added to the public dashboard?
It was not open to the public, essentially project-based HPAP for this particular project. So it's part of the funding on the project. So you would have to apply for a home at Crawford Townhomes or Crawford Landing to get this subsidy.
Right. So 7.3 million was added to the budget. I think $3.8 million of that was for Crawford Landing. So the balance, 2 point something million, I guess, was that also for a specific project, or was that available to the general HPAP pool?
So I'm not sure what you're looking at. Crawford Landings has approximately 6 or 7 million total. I think what may have been happening, and Beth, you could speak to this, is that as the CDBG projections are coming in, or the repay that is part of the HPAP budget, we have sort of been advancing some of the Crawford townhome dollars in order to close on the pipeline. So it's a difference between the commitment and actually getting the monies to the project to close, I think.
Okay, it sounds like you and Ms. Spooner Shiflett are saying two different things, unless I'm misunderstanding. So there's 7.3 million that was added to that in additional funds that went to the HPAP budget. I understood Ms. Spooner Shiflett to say that $3.8 million of that was for Crawford Landing.
3.8 is for Crawford. There's another 3 million that was added. I have to look and see. I think that actually came from EHAP into local HPAP. And then there's also there's $10 million in an interagency project with DEMPED as part of the Black Homeownership Strike Force that is also available to us, but you won't see it in the DB0 budget.
Okay.
So, but there's a lot going on here, because the initial budget, right, of $32 million included $8.8 million of CDBG, which we thought would be available, but actually most of which we spent in FY23. So we've basically been filling that gap all year. So as we've been able to augment the HPAP budget all year, we've been filling that hole.
All right. The 10 million for was it the Black home ownership
Strike
strike
force.
force? Is that money expended or is it still?
It is obligated,
Okay.
but as I understand it, and there's also a timeline problem, that the administrators are actually closing loans against that money. So, it may show as unspent, but that's a lag in the billing.
Okay. So what I guess still not clear, or I'm still not completely clear on the Black home ownership strike force. I'll come back to that, but the $3 million, not for the Crawford project, where's that money? Like where, yeah, is it expended? Was it available to the general HPAP pool?
I believe that it was. I need to pull up the right chart, but I think that it was actually reprogrammed from EHAP into
Oh.
HPAP.
Okay, could you follow up,
Mhm.
so we have clarity on that
Mhm.
and the $10 million Black home ownership strike
Yes.
force? Thank you. So from the HPAP funds, the diffs showed $14.6 million spent, $5.1 million obligated, and $500,000 committed, which equals 20.2 million, which is less than the initial 26.2 million that the dashboard says ran out in January. Why is this number less? Why is what we're seeing on diffs
So
less?
what happens is that you actually commit to HPAP and then you close on your house. 90 to whatever the closing date is. So you have the money budgeted. We are committing the money to you so you can close on your house. That timeline from when it gets actually to you, like, for example, we have about 5 that aren't closed now that we're actually trying to get the dollars to get to the closing table, if that makes sense, even though it was committed already. So that may be what you're seeing in terms of the timeline.
But looking at diffs, it looks like there should still be $6 million somewhere, which means you shouldn't be looking for the money to get people to the closing table because it looks like it's still sitting in the HPAP account.
I don't know why it's deficit. She's going to answer that.
Yeah. Sure that I'm on. There is a lag between the budget showing up and the grant agreement getting modified and the purchase order being created. So I've been working with the program staff to try to tighten that timeline, but there is a gap in all of those steps, unfortunately. But if I'm looking right now at the sum of all the grant agreements, it's $34.5 million.
Okay. Okay, yeah, this shows with the additional 7.3 million adjustment, $13.4 million still available for HPAP. So it is confusing, not very transparent. You're working to tighten the lag.
Yes, I agree. It's very frustrating. It is frustrating for me as well.
I'm sure it is. Okay. How long do you expect the HPAP budget to last in fiscal year 25 with the mayor's budget proposal?
To lag or to last?
last.
I mean, honestly, the budget is effectively the same as it is
Last year.
this year. So I think this year is the model.
I mean, I think. So there's a number of things that, program changes that we are hoping to institute so that people have further clarity beyond the dashboard about how to administer HPAP. So in terms of the timing of it, it's a little hard to answer if those program changes actually take place. So that's why I'm kind of hesitating, but if it were to act the same as it is today, I don't think it would be far different. In fact, it may even be shorter in terms of funding because prices have gone up, interest rates have gone up. People are going to need a little more than they did previously. So it might be a little bit shorter in terms of timing. But if there are changes to the program, it may not. But if everything were to stay the same, I don't see why it would, market forces have not changed to make me think that it'll be extended any further. And I don't know that it's about timing so much as how many people we can help, right? And the budget is the budget, so.
What program changes are you planning to recommend?
Just so that there's certainty around HPAP when people are shopping. I mean, there came some questions about, I put my deposit on a sales contract and I think the dashboard helped, but there may be one or two that it didn't help. And so just trying to think through that. I'm not entirely sure what that is. This is in the process, and we'll be proposing something to kind of make it more certain about, I've got the money, I can shop, I can do, in advance, and hopefully getting out in front of that will help reduce some of the consternation, maybe give people opportunity to negotiate, also looking for other down payment assistance funds, working with other banks. So there's a lot of pieces to come together in order to kind of succinctly lay out what the changes are today, but I am looking at that.
Okay, so the program changes that you're thinking through right now are more along transparency and helping people access other sources of funds.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me go back a half step. The difference between the dashboard on HPAP and the DIFS system with a $13.4 million difference in the two. Why isn't DIFS showing this money as obligated?
Because we are making all of the beneficiary payments by direct voucher. So rather than by purchase orders. So as we are getting approved payment files from our administrator, we're just processing payments out the door. So that means they have approved applicants that aren't yet showing as an obligation or as an expenditure in the system because we don't have them yet.
Okay. So then why doesn't it show as committed?
We could make that commitment based on what LEDC tells us every day, but it would be a dummy commitment. It wouldn't have any meaning, and it would be it would have to change every day based on payment files they send us.
So what has to happen before the money is indicated as either obligated or committed?
So the only way to do that is to put a requisition into the system. So if they were to tell us today that they've got $5 million worth of commitments to applicants, we could put a requisition in for $5 million to hold those funds. But then they're going to send us a payment file tomorrow. So then we need to modify that requisition down by the amount of the payment file. And then they're going to have so many more dollars in new commitments based on new confirmed payments due. So then we're gonna have to modify the requisition again. So we would be doing that every day, constantly churning that commitment number.
Okay, and we're talking about HPAP and not half, right?
Yes,
Okay, okay.
I'm intimately familiar with HAF because I'm signing each and every one of those payment vouchers. That is what I do on nights and weekends. I am fully committed to the HAF program.
Yes. Living the life. So HPAP is currently funded from several pots of money, including local repay, unified fund, CDBG, and home dollars. Is that right?
Yes, although as I noted before, we don't have any CDBG resources this year.
Okay.
In spite of the original budget.
And the FY23 Unified Fund report says that at the end of FY23, there was $3.4 million left in that fund, in the Unified Fund. Is that right?
Yes, I believe that's right.
Now, how much of the FY24 United Fund funding has gone to HPAP loans?
So of that $3.4 million, we had planned fund balance use of just under $2 million this year. And almost all of that is going to HPAP. The rest of our unified fund budget is mostly fixed costs.
Okay.
And then we have planned use of fund balance next year as well. And is that right? Oh, no. Our problem actually this year is that we are coming up short on revenue, both from a fund balance perspective and from actual revenue collections and HPAP repay. So what I am expecting is that the remainder of the unified fund balance this year actually needs to close that gap so that we don't have a funding shortfall in HPAP this year because we're short on repay funding. So unified is going to help out the repay fund.
Okay. And will new funding go into repay?
Yeah, so the source of funds for repay is actual loan repayments. So for several years, particularly during COVID, when interest rates were low and people were refinancing and doing those sorts of things, we were collecting $1.8 to $1.9 million a year. This year, we are on a track to collect 800,000. So, and our budget was 1.3. So we have a real mismatch in our revenue this year. And we had a gap last year as well. So we are seeing a multi-year problem.
Okay. And does the money, so when money goes from United Fund to repay, does it get paid back or does it just go permanently?
It just goes.
Okay. Still on HPAP, in prior years, DHCD has extended the length of time that notices of eligibility are still good so that people can still try to buy a home once more funding is available. Now, will DHCD extend the expiration date again this year for people whose notices expire before the new fiscal year?
More than likely, before the end of the fiscal year, we will likely do that. How we are using the NOEs going forward with this amount of money, right? Because there's more NOEs than funding available. And again, that certainty of whether or not I should go out there and look for a house and all the things that we're evaluating around HPAP, like even should it be down payment assistant? Does it help to buy down the interest rates? You know, just those kind of things. So yeah, there's a large chance that we're going to extend that NOE because people have already been through and there's not money available. So they have that. So I think there's a good chance that we will do that. It makes sense. But how it gets and how that gets extended after that, that's sort of what I'm thinking about.
Or-
So there's not this, the sort of rush to the finish line doesn't feel very certain.
Yeah.
So we're trying to figure out how to make that rush more certain.
And we're going to keep for the foreseeable future bumping up against the
Right.
wall of limited funding.
Correct.
Let me turn to something that came up during the hearing that we haven't addressed because it's pretty specific. This is from the Shepherd condo. Shepherd Park condo warranty situation. Why did DHCD approve the $100 million of warranty security money, given all the issues with Shepherd Park Flats?
So we approved it. It went to Office of Administrative Hearings. They made a determination after the condo association and the developer entered into an agreement. So the OAH dismissed it without prejudice because the condo association and the developer entered into agreement for the repairs. At that point, we were no longer party to the decision.
What are the guidelines for administering these funds?
Or
where could we find them?
I don't know that there are, let me get back to you on that.
Okay. Can they be public?
The guidelines?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So this is a case of, an agreement was made between two parties after we made our determination. And after OAH had made their determination because there's an agreement that was entered into. At now, I guess the condo association is not satisfied with what happened. The warranty was already released. The letter of credit was already released to them. So now they're not satisfied with what happened or their agreement. And I don't think that there's a second bite at the apple at this point.
What was DHCD's determination?
That we should, that the developer should make the fix the issues.
If that was DHCD's determination, I don't know why they would have ended up in Office of Administrative Hearings.
They went to the office because the developer contested the decision that we made.
Okay.
So that's why they went to OAH.
Okay.
And then once
So-
they was in OAH, the developer made agreement with the condo association at that point.
My guess is if what happened then, if I'm putting a pizza together, the developer probably said to the residents, we'd love to fix these things, but we need that $100 million to fix it. And they said, okay,
100,000.
100,000. Thank you. 100,000. I definitely said 100 million a couple times. They said we need that $100,000 to fix it. And residents needed that stuff fixed. So they probably said, okay. But then they ended up, it seems, in a pretty bad place. So if that's how it played out, I understand.
So the way it played out for us was that OAH dismissed the claim because at the proceeding for OAH, they came to an agreement. So OAH dismissed the claim without prejudice. We then got a letter saying the claim is dismissed. At that point, we release the funds.
Right. No, I get that. My guess is that the residents were given the impression by the developer, this is my best guess, that they would make the fixes if the money got released, because they would use that money to make the fixes. And it seems like that didn't happen. I've had similar issues where residents have asked me, please come to my house so you can see how my house is falling apart, and their concern is Department of Buildings approved construction and signed off and said this is being done right. And 6 months later, their house is falling apart in the middle. And what the residents are saying is we're not the experts. So we're relying on the agencies to protect us. And we're left holding the bag when that doesn't happen. So we need to understand where and how, particularly in the future, we can make sure we are protecting residents as much as possible. Because I mean, they're probably in a really difficult place right now, it seems. This is something we've got to think through. So I have similar concerns. As you know, we've discussed it, I think, in this hearing last year around DHCD money financing projects that don't meet the test of time. A year, 2 years later, residents are complaining about major deficiencies in the buildings. This isn't all under DHCD's purview. But we do collectively as a government have a responsibility to figure out what's happening and what we do about it. So I think we need to work with other agencies, sister agencies, to figure out how we can stand in the gap better for residents. Those are all my questions. Let me run through the three goals as I see them at this point to make sure we're on the same page. So first goal is to produce 3,000 additional affordable housing units by calendar year 2025. The second goal is to preserve 715 units within FY24, including 60 units in small buildings, 450 units using HPTF, 5 units with critical repairs, 100 units preserved through acquisition, and 100 units through the single-family residential rehab program. And the third goal is promote neighborhood stability by, in fiscal year 2024, preventing 50 evictions and foreclosures, conducting 100 counseling sessions for existing small businesses and new businesses, and creating 250 jobs in the various targeted areas.
So one of the things that I do want to caveat with that is that we don't know, the pens aren't down on the budget, right? So that's one. So these may need to be adjusted depending on where we end up at the final budget. The ones that you read were the ones that I stated for fiscal year 24 specifically, not for fiscal year 25. Just want to make sure that we're clear on that.
Okay.
So they would be already a little less for fiscal year 25 for some of them.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Right. But the 3,000 additional affordable.
That's for 25.
Okay, that's what. Okay. The others are fiscal year 24. But assuming none of your budgets are cut, these goals are good. Assuming there's more money, we can talk through that. Okay. Any other concerns or caveats?
No.
I appreciate again you, Director, and your team, all the work you're doing, the work with the committee as well. What I heard loud and clear from residents is broad concern about the cut to the Housing Production Trust Fund. If we're not producing new units, then the cost of housing is going up. There's no two ways about it. I've heard more in this hearing than I think I ever have about preservation, which is a priority of mine and a priority of yours, and clearly a priority for residents as well. There's a lot of concern around a number of our programs like housing counseling, our small building programs, programs that support TOPA, but a number of programs supported by DHCD. There's a lot of concern about what's happening with funding and reductions in funding, and the cut in funding for housing counseling and the loss of half funding will result in more people facing housing crises. So when we look at the long-term implications of this budget, if we're not able to figure out how to increase some of these budget marks, it is going to have an outsized impact on people who have the least in this city, and significantly on Native Washingtonians. And to the gentleman, I know he was, alone in this testimony, but the gentleman who testified that he's at risk of losing his family house in real time. This is a really good real life example of the benefits or consequences of having or not having some of these programs. What I want to stress again, for any residents or organizations watching, please reach out to other council members, reach out to the chair of the council. The budget is in the hands of the council at this point, so you can call the mayor's office or our agencies if you want, but priority really should be council members. We're going to do everything we can to protect and increase funding in these programs, but we do need help from residents, because folks may not believe it, but you all calling members of the council will mean more than me calling them, because they're used to hearing from me. So residents, please reach out to other council members about our housing programs. And I want to thank our residents who testified and those who watched the hearing. I also want to mention that if anyone is interested in keeping up with this committee's work and finding ways to get involved, please do sign up at robertwhiteatlarge.com so we can be in touch with updates. The record for this hearing will be held open for 1 week from today until the close of business on Monday, April 29th at 5:30 p.m. Anyone who's interested in submitting written testimony for the record can do so through the council's hearing management system at lims.dccouncil.gov/hearings, LIM as in Michael S. .dccouncil.gov/hearings. The business before this committee is finished for today. The time is 5:28 p.m. and this budget oversight hearing is adjourned.